History, for many of us, it feels like this settled story, right? Like it's all carved in stone. But what if the very foundations of that story were built on just one perspective? What if challenging those established narratives could profoundly reshape your entire understanding of the world? Today, we're doing just that. We're diving into a book that really demands this kind of rigorous re-examination. Destiny Disrupted, A History of the World Through Islamic Eyes by Tamim Ansary. Now, we believe that some books, well, they must be challenged. This analysis uses, where appropriate, a step-by-step critical thinking framework. We map claims to evidence. We also apply an intellectual framework, drawing from the works of Mortimer J. Adler. And we use the Golden Rule and the U.S. Preamble to identify ethical asymmetries. We'll wrap up with a logical analysis and a balanced assessment of the book. And just so you know, you are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation powered by Google's NotebookLM for deeper, more dynamic book analysis. This book offers a perspective that's, well, incredibly important for gaining knowledge quickly but thoroughly. It gives you a unique lens on global history, one many of us might not have seen before. So let's unpack this book. What exactly is Tamim Ansary trying to achieve with Destiny Disrupted?
Well, Ansary's intent is pretty profound, actually. As an Afghan-American author, he's crafted this work not as some dry academic text, but as a really accessible historical narrative. His main goal is to tell the story of world events, but through the eyes of Islamic civilization. Think about seeing 1,500 years of history, from Islam's start in the 7th century, through its huge empires, its innovation, its changes, all the way to today, but centered on the experiences, the perspectives of Muslim peoples. He explicitly says he wants to open up a view of the other side. He's basically trying to bridge the significant cultural and historical gap that, often exists in mainstream Western stories. It's about offering a mirror, really, for one culture to see itself and a window for others to glimpse a different but just as valid historical path.
And that's exactly why this book feels so timely, doesn't it? So relevant right now. So many of us grew up with history classes focused almost entirely on Europe and, well, its offshoots. To have a narrative like Ansary's, which just unapologetically centers a different civilization, it forces you to completely recalibrate your mental map of global events. It's not just an alternative account, it's a fundamental shift in perspective. Okay, so as we dig into his arguments, what are the central claims Ansary is making here? And how does he try to, convince us?
Right. Well, digging into Ansary's core arguments, you see a few central ideas he keeps coming back to, and he supports them through this rich, unfolding story. One of his most profound claims is this idea of parallel histories. He argues that for centuries, the Islamic and Western worlds developed side by side, but largely in isolation from each other. They each had their own centers of power, their own intellectual breakthroughs, their own periods of decline even.
That's a powerful idea. So it's not just about different interpretations of the same history, but almost entirely different historical paths. Can you give me an example of how that plays out?
Exactly, yeah. Take the Crusades, for instance. Often in Western narratives, they're portrayed as this pivotal, almost heroic clash of civilizations, right? And Syria, though, he frames them very differently. For the flourishing Islamic world of that time, these were often just, well, minor border skirmishes, kind of a fleeting distraction from their own internal stuff, their vibrant intellectual life. While Europe was recovering from its dark ages, the Abbasid Caliphate was this beacon of learning and innovation. He shows how each civilization developed its own internal logic, its own common sense about the world. And this led to profound misunderstandings when they did finally clash more directly.
Okay, I see.
Another major claim is the impact of religion and politics. Ansary illustrates how Islam is depicted as both a spiritual path and an inseparable sociopolitical force. It wasn't just a set of beliefs for individuals, it was the blueprint for states, for legal systems, for intellectual traditions. He shows how the very structure of Islamic governance, from the early caliphates to later empires, was deeply intertwined with religious doctrine, how leaders often got their legitimacy from being guardians of the faith.
So it's about how Islam shaped the whole fabric of society, not just personal belief. Okay, what about the big moments, the significant events? Does he just rehash them or offer a different angle?
Oh, he absolutely offers a fresh angle on significant events, definitely. He gives a lot of attention to foundational moments like the Sunni and Shia schism, not just as a theological thing, but as a political and social fracture that profoundly shaped the Islamic world's future. He walks you through the rise and fall of powerful dynasties, the Umayyads, the Abbasids, detailing their innovations in governance, science, art, showing how these eras forged distinct cultural identities. When discussing, say, the Mongol invasions, Ansary highlights the devastating cultural and intellectual losses from the Islamic perspective, not just the military conquest side. His narrative is really rich with these historical turning points, and he substantiates them by diving into their cultural, philosophical, and broader societal context, revealing how they were experienced within Islamic civilization.
Right.
And finally, he consistently connects these historical patterns to contemporary relevance. Ansary doesn't just tell history for history's sake. He draws explicit lines from past events to modern issues. He suggests that many current global challenges, misunderstandings, conflicts, especially between the West and the Islamic world, they have deep historical roots. His account really advocates for cross-cultural understanding by showing how ingrained these parallel histories and their consequences have become, urging readers, to recognize these historical echoes in today's headlines. Now, when we look at how Ansary presents his information, what we might call his epistemic lens, meaning how does he actually construct knowledge in this book? What stands out about the nature of what he's telling us?
That's a crucial distinction, yeah. In Destiny Disrupted, you can pretty clearly differentiate between what feels like opinion and what's presented as knowledge. The opinion often comes through in claims reflecting his perspective, his conjecture, particularly when he discusses the nuances of jihad, maybe suggesting its interpretation evolved, or offering his view on why scientific inquiry might have declined in certain Islamic regions. Those are his interpretations, his read on motivations and broader implications. On the other hand, knowledge is presented as what well-sourced historical facts, specific dates like the Hijra, pivotal events like the Battle of Tours, the transitions between dynasties like the Umayyads to the Abbasids. These are laid out as empirical information. They form the undeniable backbone of his narrative.
Precisely. And Ansary's approach generally respects diverse stakeholders. He tries hard to present an internally authentic Islamic perspective. He's attempting to show you how a Muslim might have understood their own history. Yet it's worth noting some readers and critics do identify what they see as lingering Eurocentric framing in parts, perhaps in how he structures comparisons or emphasizes certain interactions. The book does maintain an empathetic tone, which helps reduce overt bias, definitely, but its portrayal of reform movements within Islam and the impact of Western influence, well, that often invites more debate on the true reciprocity of understanding between cultures.
So it's a logically consistent narrative. It flows well as a story.
Right.
But it absolutely contains subjective interpretations, especially about historical actors' motivations or what counts as moral success or failure for Islamic states. Some critics, for example, argue Ansary might sometimes oversimplify complex political forces, or maybe underrepresent the rich internal critiques and disagreements within Islamic civilization itself.
So while it's a powerful narrative, we as readers need to be aware it's still a narrative shaped by its author, not a purely objective chronicle.
And if we connect this to the broader picture, the book clearly aims for understanding. It integrates religious, social, political history into one coherent pattern. It weaves together ancient, medieval, modern periods. It really helps you grasp the continuity and evolution of Islamic civilization. He's trying to make sense of this vast, complex history and present it as a unified story.
Exactly. And in doing that, it reaches for wisdom. It attempts to distill moral and philosophical lessons from Islamic history that remain relevant for us today. It's about more than just a timeline. It's about drawing deeper meaning, about human endeavor, cultural resilience, the long-term consequences of decisions made centuries ago. It really asks you to consider what enduring insights this huge 1,500-year journey offers us now.
This kind of nuanced analysis, looking beyond the surface. That's exactly what we aim for here. And Sary's book really makes you think about how different perspectives can just reshape everything, doesn't it? And speaking of deep dives into books and thought-provoking content, if you're finding this kind of critical exploration as fascinating as we do.
At a convenient midpoint, we want to remind you about Mindful Moments. That's our YouTube channel offering AI book analysis, summaries, critiques, and these conversations, all aiming to inspire reflection and rational thought.
Definitely check that out. Okay, now let's pivot a bit. Let's talk about the ethical dimensions of this historical narrative. How does the book hold up when we consider frameworks like the Golden Rule or the principles in the U.S. Preamble?
That's an insightful lens, yeah. When we apply a Golden Rule assessment, our analysis looked at how the book portrays different groups and their treatment throughout history. It implicitly raises questions, doesn't it, about how historical actors or even the narrative itself treats the other. Are there moments highlighted where different people showed mutual respect? Or where that respect was conspicuously absent? For instance, Ansary's narrative often showcases periods of pretty remarkable tolerance and cultural exchange in Islamic empires, like Andalusia, where different faiths coexisted, contributed to these vibrant intellectual centers. But conversely, it also recounts conflicts where that reciprocity was clearly abandoned, highlighting the human cost.
Okay. And the preamble framework, how does that apply?
Right, so using an evaluation inspired by the preamble of the U.S. Constitution, not as a judgment of history, obviously, but as a way to understand the values in play within Ansary's narrative, we see several things. Regarding union, the book clearly promotes intercultural dialogue. By offering this non-Eurocentric view, it fosters a potential healing of division, East and West. It encourages you to see a shared, though often separated, human journey. When it comes to justice, Ansary explores various ideas of justice in historical Islamic contexts, how Islamic law evolved to address societal needs. But the modern implications, they're often left open for your interpretation, not explicitly stated. For liberty and welfare, Ansary highlights the value placed on education, political agency, cultural adaptation across centuries. He details, for example, the flourishing of academies, libraries during the Abbasid Golden Age. That illustrates a period where intellectual pursuits were supported, contributing to societal well-being. On security, the narrative recounts periods of peace, but also extensive warfare. It often contextualizes the broader impact on populations, the stability of strong empires versus the chaos of their collapse. And finally, for tranquility, the book recognizes ongoing unrest, internal strife, especially in regions marked by imperial collapse or modern conflict, acknowledging that enduring peace, well, it's often been an elusive goal.
Okay, so bringing all these critical lenses together, what does this really mean for our understanding of destiny disrupted? What would you say are the book's core strengths and its weaknesses?
Based on our logical analysis, the balanced conclusion presents a pretty clear picture. The book's strengths are compelling, really significant. First, its unique perspective. It offers this rare, non-Eurocentric telling of world history. It just fundamentally shifts the center of gravity, letting you see the world from a viewpoint largely left out of conventional Western education. For someone used to the usual narrative, it feels like discovering a whole new continent on the map of history.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Second, it has an accessible narrative. Ansary uses this engaging conversational style and makes a complex history approachable for a wide audience. He's a storyteller, right? He weaves facts and interpretations into a compelling flow, unlike many dense academic histories. He uses vivid metaphors, personal reflections, makes distant events feel immediate, relatable. And third, it provides profound cultural insight. It illuminates the historical drivers of Islamic thought, politics, social organization. You gain a deeper understanding of why certain events unfolded as they did, rooted in the specific cultural and religious values.
Okay, but what about the weaknesses?
Right. It also has weaknesses. There's a degree of subjectivity. It relies more on narrative art than, say, rigorous academic historiography. At times, it makes broad claims with limited explicit sourcing or, deep scholarly footnotes. For example, some of his interpretations of complex geopolitical shifts might feel more like a thoughtful essay than a meticulously cited argument. That could be a concern for someone looking for purely empirical history. Also, some critics note a limited internal critique. Certain sects, reform movements, philosophical disagreements within Islam, they're covered, but sometimes only briefly, which might not fully capture the rich internal diversity and debates within Islamic civilization. While Ansary touches on the Sunni-Shia divide, for instance, you might wish for more detail on other intellectual schools or dissenting voices that challenge the status quo throughout history.
So it's a valuable perspective, but maybe not the whole complex picture internally. And just to note, this systematic analysis follows the ethical and intellectual rigor of a comprehensive book analysis practical application framework. We aim for a transparent, nuanced, and multi-perspective assessment of destiny disrupted. This raises an important question for you, our listener.
Absolutely. As we look forward, you have to ask, how do newer movements and reinterpretations within Islamic societies continue to redefine historical paths and global interactions today? And what are the implications of that persistent Eurocentric framing in global affairs, even when a book like Ansary's tries so powerfully to offer an alternative view? It's a reminder, isn't it? History isn't just about the past. It's a living, breathing force shaping our present and our future.
So, as we conclude this exploration, reflect on the enduring power of historical narratives and the critical work really required to understand the full spectrum of human experience. Your role as a listener engaging with diverse perspectives is what truly enriches our collective understanding.
Click the link on screen for the in-depth book analysis. Subscribe, share, purchase via link, and think rationally.
See the many genre based book podcasts at Mindful Moments. Subscribe and nurse your mind on the go.